Hello and welcome to Push Your Glasses Up. I'm Mikey. Today we're talking about Echo, and it's a Marvel project that is adjacent to Daredevil and Hawkeye, and that means we, of course, have our good friend Capt Cash back on the show to talk about it. In the meantime, before we get into it, hey, if you enjoy the podcast or any of the videos that go up on the channel, I know they've been a little bit slim. I'm going to try to get back into the swing of things with the new year starting up and all the strikes being over and whatnot. Hey, like them. Subscribe to the channel. It helps out a great deal. If you prefer the podcast in an audio only format, we got that too. Just go to whatever podcast service you have. You can probably find us there. Let's talk about Echo. Cash, welcome back to the show.
Pleasure to be here, Mikey.
So top down, how did you feel about Echo?
It is definitely one of the stronger Disney Plus shows. It's definitely the strongest Disney Plus show. I mean, I liked She-Hulk, but I'd say since the last time we saw Echo, in fact, Hawkeye was the last time I was like, oh, wow. But, you know, again, soft spot for She-Hulk still. But This was really great. It was something different. I do think it suffers from what's been happening with all of the Disney Plus shows, which is
endings.
The final episode just wasn't as tight as maybe I would have liked it, but still I thought it ended well. So yeah, I mean, good show. I would recommend it, even to people who don't know or care about the Marvel characters.
Yeah, I'm with you for the most part. I think it's good, not great. I think I prefer I think I prefer She-Hulk more, and WandaVision I prefer more. I think for the most part, other than when it dips off in the typical MCU TV show kind of way, I think it maintains a steady level of like a solid 7 through the whole thing until the end.
No, agreed.
And the problem that comes into play is, or not the problem, but like when the things dip off in the end, it's when they lean into superheroes. And it's like, it's the thing that happens each and every time where it's like, okay, now the confrontation happens and it's just a fairly regular
got their powers and maybe their suit.
Yeah, exactly. And you know, this does a little bit more of the Doctor Strange ending as opposed to just like two people fighting. It does have a slightly more clever thing with the themes it goes through, but it still has that taper off aspect, and it's a thing that's disappointing because I think this, even though the show doesn't for the most part go above and beyond with like the like high level quality mark, it's like just a solid thing all the way through. I think what happens is by just distorting into that sort of theming and stuff, it kind of just like throws away the good theming stuff that was going on through the whole show, which is the character development, the representation, and the community stuff. I think is just all like probably the top tier stuff in the show. And like there's high points that, you know, it spikes a little bit and they're brief and everything, but I think there's things that we can go over that are, you know, worthwhile aspects of the show as I pull my notes up because they were behind the cameras. Yeah, it's good and not amazing. But like, you know, the flashback scene with the Daredevil fight was a brief, amazing moment. There's a part later on where Maya goes and has a conversation with her grandmother after being like separated for 20 years, but then also like avoiding each other at the same time once they're back in the same reservation area again. And it's like, those are all really, really great moments. And then it just becomes like the typical confrontation. And I appreciate that when they added powers to this character who normally doesn't really have powers, they chose something that was not fighting. They chose like trying to heal and help somebody by, you know, going through her history and her heritage. But it's still just kind of.
Let me ask a question.
Yeah.
Were her powers the healing powers, or are her powers she's able to echo any of the powers of the people that's come before her?
Right, which, you know, they could expand upon, but they very specifically said that your mother was a healer. So like,
oh right, that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, I'm taking that.
Echo her.
Yeah, I'm taking that more as like that's the general trait that passes down, and then there's just like some super strength or whatever.
Yeah,
because like
I gotta say,
the super strength thing was the way she passed it off. Yeah,
like I'm like, I don't dislike this, but I also feel like it would have been stronger if you didn't include it.
Yes, and it's because it's you're not going to be able to get that in camera and make it look real. Like you're just not going to be able to.
Lady throwing a 180-pound
Chula isn't going to be convincing in that way. But yeah, it's, you know, I appreciate that it also does, like, you know, Marvel tends to lean into the setup for the next thing every single time, but like I like where they're going with this because it is storyline stuff from the comics that I did like, with the Kingpin mayor stuff going on. So, you know, that stuff that I think is good going forward, and that's probably going to be a part of Daredevil Born Again and whatnot. And Kingpin is just like Vincent D'Onofrio's portrayal of Kingpin is still hands down one of the best that Marvel has ever had. And so
full on terrifying.
Yeah.
Still.
And even though it's slightly toned down for this, it's still a very imposing character. It's interesting. Like, I haven't had a chance to really talk to anybody about the show yet. And it's weird. Like, I feel like I'm going to come across more negative, even though I am like, it was right here the whole time for the most part. Like, and I think the shorter season helps that.
I think so too. That's one of the things where I have no trouble recommending this to people, because it requires very little background knowledge. I mean, if you know who the Kingpin is, that's going to be exciting and interesting, but the Kingpin does just a perfect enough job being terrifying in this that you don't really have to know anything.
I would say you probably want to watch Hawkeye, though.
I mean, it would be helpful, don't get me
wrong. It would be very helpful for the reason he has bandages on his eye, for why she's running from New York, Granted, they do little flashback things. Like that first episode was all like recap stuff, so they do a decent job with it. Yeah.
Which included the Daredevil fight, which can we speak at length now? Because that is the only thing where I would go, if you didn't know what
it's the reason you're on the show.
It's nice. You brought me to talk about the Daredevil stuff. Yeah. So let me talk about the Daredevil stuff. I really liked it. It's cool confirmation that Daredevil was alive and kicking during the blip. I think that's the first time we've had confirmation of that.
Yeah.
We knew Kingpin was around and kicking during the blip because of Hawkeye, but we didn't have any evidence of Daredevil operating then. So that's kind of a neat thing, and maybe Daredevil Reborn will address that to some extent.
Born Again.
I'd honestly be curious to know if they said it like as not a prequel, but like a midquel, like said it during the blip, Wilson Fisk's rise back to power and Matt's attempt to stop him. I think that there's a lot of interesting things you could do with that. If they opt to do that, though, I always find it frustrating because, well, I know how this ends.
Right.
Plus, the way the show ends, the way Echo ends, more specifically, it does sort of give you the sense that no, they're moving forward for the Fisk is mayor. So probably that won't be the case.
Yeah, I don't see it being set fully back then. I could see them doing non-linear stuff where you're getting corresponding themes to why Matt would be doing what he's doing in an episode with what he was doing back then. Like I saw something online that was like, it's a cool idea for like, I want the first episode to just be him dealing with the aftermath of surviving the blip and the chaos going on afterwards, because his senses would be going wild because just New York in general is going to be in chaos. So yeah, I that would be a cool idea. But I think it would also be cool to just kind of like split it up through the season.
Yeah. Which is another thing I think is a vote in Echo's favor, is that just that distance that you have, right? If you didn't want to, like, I don't think there's anything in here that if you didn't want to watch it, you'd be obligated to watch it to understand more of the MCU stuff, which sounds like I'm not recommending it, but no, it's really good specifically for that. It does feel like it's a pretty, they had a story to tell.
It's a little more standalone. Yeah.
Yeah. And I like it.
Yeah. And that's the thing with it too, is like, being that it's a little more standalone, it actually feels that it's not full like Netflix tone, and it's not quite just Disney Plus tone. I think they found a good balance with that, where it gives it a little bit more of its own identity, because it isn't as cartoonish as some of the MCU shows can be, and it's not quite as dark as the Netflix stuff could be, because there is like cartoonish stuff that even in the positive side is still in there, like the contact lenses and stuff, where which is like, I think it's done in a way that it's a little hokey, the animation on it and stuff, but I keep seeing reactions of people who do live with deafness, and they are all reacting to it in a very positive light, and that makes me happy. So like,
oh, that's great.
Yeah.
I actually thought that was a really interesting way to kind of play with the convention, right? Of, how does this one person who ostensibly speaks very limited sign language from what we saw in Hawkeye, to someone who is deaf. And I thought that was a really clever way to do that.
Yeah. And it's just, they had some neat stuff with that throughout. It like all the Kingpin stuff was really cool for like that kind of thing. And then you see the flashbacks of the dinner tables, and then later on you see the flashbacks of the dinner tables, and they like the interpreter, he like sends her away, and then like Dexter's her. Yeah. It's like,
I was a little frustrated with that. I'm like, I feel like Kingpin would be smarter than to just randomly murder the ASL translator he had around, but I don't know, maybe.
It showed him like being in with the cops already. Like when she in the first episode, when she's doing like the motorcycle thing and has the motorcycle go out the window and stuff. When she's being arrested, he like puts his hand on the cop's shoulder, and he like turns away and stuff.
Yeah.
And they don't make any like butts about it. They just let him take her. So yeah.
Yep, that's fine. He can have this one.
Yeah, exactly. So what would you say is probably like the best aspect of this show? Like, is it the characters? Is it the action? Because there was action in pretty much every episode.
The action was good in this, I thought.
Yeah.
I mean, aside from the Daredevil fight, there's a big dust up at the roller rink.
Yeah. And
I thought that was, not only was it brutal, right, but it was interesting, and it was shot in a fun way. The action in this is very, very strong.
Yeah. I think the action choreography is really strong. I think the filming of the action could have been a little bit better, because it feels like the hits miss a little bit. Like some of the impacts they feel like movie hits. They don't feel like you're actually seeing somebody hit somebody. And part of that is, limitation of movement. Some of that is camera work. And I think most of it is camera work, because it's like just some of the certain angles of like over shoulders and stuff to see somebody do a kick or whatever. It's just, it didn't line up all that well for what should have felt a little more impactful, because it is like the street level stuff, people just beating the crap out of each other, right? But yeah,
I mean, at one point I remember in the roller rink fight, she kicks a guy and he like appears to spit blood all over the disco ball. I'm like, oh, okay, that was pretty cool.
That's a good, just like moment rather than like the actual fighting stuff that I think is good. But like that episode is brutal too, just because like the informant guy, like the way he goes out is
I mean, it's right
gruesome.
in your face.
That is like, gruesome. He's looking into camera and just spitting blood out and stuff. So I think that they found the right balance of those tones for sure. The Daredevil fight, I think, is the best action in the series, which is like, it's great because like you want that from a Daredevil fight with anybody, let alone with the lead of this show. But it's also unfortunate because it's the first episode, and so nothing else lived up to that fight scene for me, unfortunately. But like the stuff that's in there, the choreography for Matt is so like I marked out when he went through the shelving. And like he had that acrobatic, like his legs were tight together, and like it was. You got the iconography of his silhouette perfect in that, and is great. And then like when they're outside of the cage, but the camera is inside of the cage, and you see her do the delayed, like she grabs her leg and just like lets it rip. Like, that stuff is so creative and good. Why was it like a lot of it was still great? But like, why couldn't it be that level through the whole thing?
I mean, I think honestly, it's because that's really the only time in the entire series you have two people that are meant to be very, very good at fighting each other.
Yeah, she's always outclassing people for the most part on all the other.
And it's goons she beats up mostly. There's no like other martial artists that she deals with other than Daredevil. And I mean,
goons and hillbillies. Specifically, there's a couple of people who aren't really goons. They're just people from the wrong side of the tracks, kind of.
Rednecks, the bad country folk.
There's some weird decisions in that roller rink, man. That Make America Skate Again thing.
I loved that they had a roller rink.
Oh, I think that was great.
Laser tag.
Yeah, I think the references to like, we've been doing this since the 90s, and it's like it still works. Like, yeah, that's every roller rink, but it was just that mural. I don't know about that mural.
Make America Skate Again
was. So is Kingpin not a stand-in for that guy then? Is that guy also in this universe?
I think it's a good. If that guy is in this universe, Kingpin had him killed already.
I'm all right with that. It's fine. I do wish that, knowing that this was going to be sort of a return to pseudo Netflix tone, and kind of bring back that more grounded, mature, like it's still very cartoonish and like other than that one scene where like that guy gets killed in the roller rink, like none of it is too mature.
Yeah, I mean that's the thing. It picked up a PG or a TVMA rating.
If it wasn't for that kill, I don't think it would be.
It earned it for that, but other than that, they don't use anything above PG-13 language. There's no nudity. It's just, like a hard PG-13 is what we're dealing with here.
I like where they found that balance. I just wish they could have tied off the end a little bit better.
Yeah.
Just because it's like you could see where it was all coming together, and like the best stuff in this show and in most of these shows, but like in this show in particular, is the character stuff. And so like
hard to agree.
It's to just come down to like a standoff is always disappointing when you have so many great characters. Like Biscuits is the best. I love that character so much. And Biscuits and Billy Jack, just phenomenal.
I have young kids. I watch a lot of Bluey.
Yeah.
When the dad in Bluey does something, rather than use a curse word, he goes, Biscuits.
Yeah.
And I have been, since I watched Echo, my wife and I have been walking around going, biscuits.
Yeah.
Because he tries so hard.
Yeah.
And right until the end where he does something that also feels like, for as grounded as a worldview setup, it strains credulity, let's say.
Right. Yeah.
But he's a fuck up, bless him.
Yeah. And it's like, just the best comic relief in the whole show is his. In every time that he's on screen, he's always stealing the funny spot in the show. The train sequence is like, I think is like whatever. But like his part in it where he's tailing the train is so fun. And then like the aftermath of that being that the truck is destroyed and he's just like, he's slowly driving by and his grandmother sees him driving by and he's just like, it's so, all of that worked perfectly. So it's just like the dramatic stuff that also works really well. Like I was saying earlier, the conversation between Maya and her grandmother at the dining room table where she's like learning about this connection to her heritage and stuff. That stuff works so well that it's disappointing to have that thing that we know to expect at this point.
Yeah. I mean, and the thing that adds to the final episode sort of, is Biscuits manages using parts from a junkyard to make
a monster truck
into a monster truck. And I'm like, you could have.
It's fun. That was fun. But yeah, it's, I think for him that moment works better than the actual confrontation because it is just in line with his like side character comedy the whole time. But then you like when you go to the actual confrontation between Maya and Kingpin with the surrounding people of like the goons and the family members of Bonnie and Chula, it's just like, this could have been a more interesting conversation to be had as opposed to like, I like the part where she has the like, you're not the last Jedi kind of moment where like she had her family standing behind her her ancestors, like I should say. Right. Yeah. And so like I wish they would have leaned more into that instead of because they almost had it. But then they lost it when they did the like, and also Nana is super strong and like that stuff is fine, but like it just didn't work as well as it could have for me. So yeah.
I mean, that was frustrating. Also, the way it ends, where it's cool that she chooses to use her powers to try to like heal Kingpin's emotional trauma or whatever, and dubiously succeeds. Like I can't really tell the way it was shot.
I'm curious what it's gonna actually mean.
Yeah,
because you would think like, okay, so she stole that part of him away so that he doesn't have the burning hate like in him the whole time, I guess. But like the way it was kind of played is more that like you're not mad anymore, but he was still mad. And so it's like it kind of played a little bit strange in the moment. Yeah.
And then he just leaves.
Yeah.
And it's over.
What did you do? I'm getting on my plane. Like,
exactly.
It's a little.
It felt like
they needed a way to get him out of there, but didn't really have a way to get him out of there.
Exactly. Yeah. And so, but again, that's frustrating. But that's not really why I'm watching the show.
Yeah,
it's for the character interactions. It's neat to see who played her. It wasn't her granddad. It was like her step granddad or whatever. Scully, the dude
why can't I think of his?
Like that guy's in everything.
Yeah, he was just in The Last of Us. He's like a classic. Like he was in a lot of. I think was he in Free Willy?
No, I'm not sure. Look it up, but either way,
yeah. Keep talking. I'll look it up. Keep going. I'll look it up.
Yeah, it's fun to see him and his interactions with Chula are pretty funny. I really I found some of the stuff where they did
Graham Greene.
flashbacks to what? Who is he?
Graham Greene.
Graham Greene.
Yeah.
Where they do
Well,
flashbacks.
he was in
to,
like Dances with Wolves and Green
Yeah.
Mile and stuff. Yeah.
Yeah. But the flashbacks to when you see the very first Chalk Dog people, and then you get the stickball game, and then you get the light horse stuff. I really found out like it's very, very different than the rest of the show.
Yeah.
But it's this sort of weird aside that this is probably giving Echo a little too much credit, that it felt a little like True Detective, where there's this
that they were attempting for it. Yeah.
Yeah.
They were,
But,
they were like, they were doing it in a way where it like early on, like the thing with the like essentially lacrosse, right? Like that is an obvious like, okay, this is one of her ancestors, and like,
Right.
but then they do like the TV show aspect of it, and it's like, okay, but what does this mean? And you don't really like, that's the confusing part you're talking about, where it's like intentional confusion in a True Detective-y kind of way that like they only answer at the end when like they pop up behind her.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, for what it's worth too, when they do the Light Horseman scene, where she's one of the tribal police, I love that when they complete that vignette, the next thing that you see is Chula on a security monitor, so it mimics that like black and white look. I'm like, oh hey, that was kind of clever.
Yeah. And also, by the way, I think it's Tantu Cardinal who plays Chula. Like I went from watching Killers of the Flower Moon like a couple weeks before this came out, like maybe 2 weeks before this came out, to watching this, and I was just like, man, she really got a little typecast in the woman who sees birds character.
What do you do? I see birds just
everywhere. But it like that, it was really cool to like, I wasn't aware that she was in this show, so like it was really cool to see. I was like, oh, she was phenomenal in that. She's gonna be great in this, and she is great in this. She is real mean in this. But like that turnaround again, I keep coming back to that dinner table scene between her and Maya, and it is a very good scene, and it ends like in a satisfactory way, but also has a little stinger at the end when she walks back out of the house and her uncle's like, how'd that go? And she's like, nah, I don't know. Like, it still has that little bit of humor to it that works really well. So I think the thing, like, I'm positive on it, even though I kind of sound a little more negative on it, but it's just because it is like, it is that steady flow and then dips off.
Yeah.
But what that means is I am maybe more excited about the stuff coming down the pipeline for TV shows, just because like we have this problem that Echo also has, where every show ends in a similar fashion kind of confrontation. And at least with this, we're getting a little bit different of a, like, they're all tonally different. Like WandaVision obviously has a different tone than Falcon and the Winter Soldier, and has a different tone than She-Hulk. And like they all have their own like genre specific kind of tones and stuff. But like none of them, they all kind of feel like they fit together a little bit more. And this feels a little bit more different to me than those do. So
I'd agree.
I'm excited for the fact that we can start kind of like leaning in this direction a little bit more. And I think that's the thing that I'm kind of taking away from Echo the most, is that we do have this, I don't want to say more mature, but like slightly more serious street level tone that we can bring forward. That isn't just like, it doesn't have to have as much of the Marvelness, right?
Yeah. I think a lot of things I see people complaining about online anymore are, oh, all the Marvel things are the same. And there is a certain tone, I think, especially there's
a level of truth to it, but it's not fully true, but yeah.
And this I think really does avoid that.
Yeah.
Right. It feels much more like the Netflix shows than it does any of the Disney shows. And that's not just because Daredevil shows up for 5 minutes of a 5-hour run.
Right.
It's the way it's shot. It's the people and types of people it deals with. It's funny because on the one hand, I want to say a lack of fantastical elements, but literally one of the vignettes is, a creation myth.
Yeah.
So I'm not really sure that that's accurate.
Yeah,
but
that's the thing, is it like, that's where I say it had a good balance of that stuff, because like that is very like Marvel-y. That's very like, especially comic booky Marvel-y stuff, where it's like, not really explaining what's happening, just like this really cool imagery of like an ancient time, and then it'll cut back into the main timeline. It's like, yes, that is a comic book. That is exactly what would happen in a comic book.
What just happened? Whatever.
Yeah. But they also like, I think they did a good job of, for the most part, shooting this in a way that is a little more cinematic. There were still problems that I had visually with some of the stuff. When she goes up on the water tower, that is the fakest looking thing I've ever seen in my life. That is the downfall of like seeing something shot on the volume, where it's like so much of this was done in like this is just a little shack in a little field. Like all of that looked really good. And then when it does cut away to either like a not tremendously like well done green screen or volume shot, it sticks out like a sore thumb when it changes back and forth. It's the same problem I had with like Avatar: The Way of Water, where I'm like, the only shots that look bad are when there's real people in the shot. Like, you can't go back and forth.
To make a cartoon, just make the cartoon.
Yeah, let the cat people go wild. But yeah, I look forward to what comes from this and what Marvel kind of takes away from it, because it doesn't seem like they've been course correcting with like the flaws that are in some of the other shows. So I'm hoping with this, where they can see the reaction of people being like, we don't need it to only be this, but can we have some more of this? And that's where I'm really interested to see where they kind of go forward from here.
Yeah, me too. I think it's really fun, and it is different enough, right?
Yeah. Cool. Well, I think that'll do it.
All right. Final word. Watch Echo, I guess. It has my recommendation. It's a good show.
We're doing this so late that it's like, I think everybody probably already did, but
if you were on the fence.
Yeah, if you were on the fence and these two random guys that like these characters say watch it, you watch it. Cool,
these two dudes, predisposition to like Marvel stuff, tell you to like this one
who will admit that there are bad things that happen in Marvel productions, but are also gonna be more open to the things still happening. Cool, man. Well, thanks again for coming back on. Until next time, bye.